In the 20th century, university rare book and archival collections busily gathered important books and manuscripts on what were then considered to be the most important people and the transformational events in Western history. Medieval illuminated manuscripts, 500-year-old printed books, pamphlets of the Protestant Reformation, the English Civil War, the French Revolution, and first editions of famous authors like Dante and Shakespeare and William Wordsworth and Charles Dickens. Or the papers of pivotal historical figures like Abraham Lincoln, whose papers we're about to display and opening a new exhibition in the library in about 2 weeks. Andrew Dixon White, as Anne just described, was Cornell's president and co-founder, but he also understood this well. His collection of books and manuscripts came to Cornell in 1891, and he believed that these collections should serve as the foundation for student learning and new scholarship, and those books and collections are still serving that function today. He believed that students learn better from original documents rather from, for example, textbooks or facsimiles or other modern versions, such as today's digital surrogates. Today, we are still engaged in building on Andrew Dixon White's foundations, seeking new collections and collecting horizons that will tell the stories of larger representative bodies of who we are as Americans. Cornell University Library is lucky to have the support and friendship of collectors and others who understand and share in that mission. Sometimes we are lucky enough to find a special ally in our efforts to preserve important elements of the past. Like Andrew Dixon White, who knew instinctively that the time to collect the printed ephemera of America's Civil War was while that conflict was happening, tonight's speaker also understood that he was living in a moment of unique opportunity and took that opportunity to rescue important materials about American life that would have otherwise been lost. So it's my pleasure this evening to introduce one of those special collectors who will share his experience on collecting and preserving the early history of hip-hop culture as it emerged in the Bronx in the 1970s and early 80s. Since the arrival of Johan's collection a year and a half ago, it has been met by thunderous enthusiasm and student engagement across Cornell and all of its departments. His hip-hop collection serves as a foundation for a growing list of new courses in the departments of history, music, English, dance, and African American history, government, and activism. Students are learning how to conduct original research using the original party and club flyers and listening to early and rare hip-hop on vinyl. The multidisciplinary embrace of this spectacular collection of records, original party flyers, and the photographs of the great Joe Conzo has been a privilege to witness, and an example of A.B. White's principles come to life. I hope Cornellians are proud, as I am, that the original documents and recordings preserving the contributions of Africa Bambaataa, Grandmaster Caz, Tony Tone, Grand Wizard Theodore, Disco Wiz, Joe Conzo, and many other hip-hop pioneers now rest in Cornell Library's vault next to the works of Shakespeare, Dante, and Wordsworth. Johan Kugelber is an author, curator, and collector. Born in Sweden, he came to America in the 1980s, and his lifelong love of music led him to a career as a producer at Warner Brothers and other music labels. In recent years, he's focused his efforts on curating exhibitions on many aspects of popular culture, bringing them before international audiences, and writing books and articles on the history of music, art, and popular culture. He produced and edited the book, Born in the Bronx, A Visual History of the Early Days of Hip-Hop, which some of you saw on the table outside, and is now the basis for the collection now at Cornell. He's also currently at work on a book documenting Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground, which is about to be published, as well as a book on the aesthetics of English and American punk music, currently in the writing phase. So I hope everyone will help me welcome Johan Kugelber.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Johan Kugelber, and in 1999 I commenced work on what was to become the Born in the Bronx book and the Cornell Hip Hop Archive. My roots are not in hip hop. wasn't much hip-hop in Sweden when I was growing up. My questionable teenage years, I was much more immersed in skateboarding and punk rock and science fiction paperbacks. But when my godson, who came to our house in 1999, who at that point was a bit of a troubled young man with some substance abuse problems and a grandiose passion for hip-hop and hip-hop culture at the age of 14, brought with him some of his favorite records and played those for me. They blew my fragile little mind. And as a professional and as some sort of aspiring musicologist and writer, I felt a little bit embarrassed at how small my knowledge was of those years in the South Bronx in the 70s that led to this global cultural movement. So what did I decide to do? I decided, all right, I'm going to do a couple of Google searches, and then I'm going to buy like 5 or 6 books on the subject, and then I'm going to buy a bunch of CD reissues and go and purchase some DVD documentaries and really learn as much as I possibly can about the baby steps of this culture and the very early days of these historical events. And, you know, after spending a couple of hours on Google, I noticed that there were very few books. There were some milestones, like Charlie Ahern's masterful book, Yes, Yes to All. And there were a couple of CD compilation anthologies, there'd been some sort of VH1 documentary, and they all sort of reminded me of, with some notable exceptions like Charlie Ahern, they reminded me of Bart Simpson's words about Krusty the Clown's autobiography. Self-serving and full of glaring omissions. And even in my ill-informed at that point way, I realized that. And so I asked my wife how she would feel if I spent the next 5, 6, 7 years attempting to learn as much as I possibly could about this, and attempting to locate as much source materials, maybe put together a book, and maybe, you know, do my part in making sure that these important events didn't get lost in time, like so many other things that aren't the history of privilege or the history of power. Because we know, as we look at our bookshelf and as we look at our history books, that it's not only the history of presidents and generals and major battles and major political groups, that all of that knowledge has to be supported by the small everyday narratives of neighborhood leaders, of community activism, of art, of popular art, of Saturday night jams where people, you know, get together to blow off steam after a hard week of work. And that narrative is of immense merit also in an academic institution. And that, you know, the notepad scribbles of a 16-year-old Mexi Ray coming up with MC routines for his hip-hop group truly warrant a place next to a Shakespeare folio or a draft of the Gettysburg Address or some of these other baffling treasures that exist at the Cornell University Library. So I commenced, you know, 6'5", with a Swedish accent and a, you know, slightly befuddled academic dress sense to investigate the South Bronx and Mount Vernon and Co-op City and North Harlem and South Harlem and all over the place, and using the research skills that I was provided by my academic parents and by my university studies to really attempt to locate as much